Well, good afternoon, councillors. Good afternoon, members of the gallery, and good afternoon to members of our community streaming in on live stream. As is customary, I'd like to take this opportunity to respectfully acknowledge the Durrumbal people, the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, and pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging. We have a full attendance, councillors. So there's no leave of absences. Moving to item 4, declarations of interest in matters on the agenda, being only one matter on this agenda. Councillors, are there any conflicts of interest? Perceived or declarable? Prescribed or declarable. Councillor Hutton.
Yes, Mr Mayor, as I provided both to yourself and the CEO, so I, Nigel Hutton, have a conflict of interest in this matter. I am President and therefore Executive Officer of the Yeppoon Lions Club Inc. until July 2021. The club is a long-term leaseholder on Great Keppel Island, and while the club has remained passive and not provided or participated in any debates around the future of the island, I acknowledge that in line with the Queensland Government legislation, my involvement at this time would be a significant conflict beyond the interests of the majority of the residents of our community. I hereby lodge my interests and inform the Council that I shall leave for the item.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Hutton. For members of the gallery and also members viewing in on live stream, it is a part of the legislation, the Local Government Act. We have two types of conflicts of interest that councillors must deal with. One is a prescribed conflict of interest, which has a very strict set of rules around it, and the other is what's called a declarable conflict of interest, where there is a little bit of flexibility in terms of whether people may stay in the room. But under a prescribed conflict of interest, a councillor who has one of those must exit the room because the conflict is of such a significant nature that it will be viewed that he or she does not or is not able to make an impartial decision or could be accused of being impartial. So Councillor Hutton has made that declaration in terms of his role as an executive officer of Yeppoon Lions, and the legislation is very clear about prescribed conflicts of interest for executive officers in community organisations. So Councillor Hutton has no choice but to leave the room. Any further declarations of conflicts of interest, councillors?
Yeah, through you, Mr Chair, to the CEO. It's a question which I'm seeking advice on. Based on that, it was raised to me that because I had signed a petition which was set up by the Progress Association, which I signed about a week ago, that perhaps that may or could be deemed to be a declared conflict of interest. And I'm really seeking advice from the CEO as to what direction I can take. I have sought legal advice through King & Co, but I would like to hear what the CEO's position on that is, if he could. Thank you.
And I will declare the same, so you can answer the question at once.
Sure, Mr Mayor, my advice to both Councillors Bellow and Lynch and anyone else in these circumstances would be that ultimately the determination of whether a conflict exists for you ultimately rests with you on the advice that you take. In my opinion, it would be a reasonable person might arrive at a conclusion that you are perhaps conflicted by that, and then by declaring your conflict you can make an admission to the meeting whether you intend to stay or absent yourself from those proceedings. If you decide to remain in the room, that then becomes a matter for the balance of your colleagues to determine whether they, as reasonable, impartial people, consider that you can consider the matter impartially.
Okay, thank you for that response. Well, based on that, I believe it would be better, and in the interest of transparency and accountability, to declare that there is concerns that I may have a perceived conflict on the basis that I was prepared to participate in a petition to support the Progress Association's position. I stand by that, and I have no problem in doing that. I believe it's within my rights to have done it, and the advice that I received from Tim Fynes-Clinton from King & Company was essentially that it's not something that he would do, but he's not a councillor. But there is nothing wrong with doing it, nor is there anything wrong with, for example, putting a notice of motion in that you are going to, you have a strong view on a particular position or issue, clearly you get to vote on that because you believe in it. And so I'll declare that here and now, and I'll hand it over to the councillors for their determination whether they believe I should stay in the room or not.
Councillor Lynch, you have the same view?
I absolutely of the same view. I'm quite confident with the way the process will go, but I'm happy to declare that I did sign the petition, and I'd like to hear the voice of the table.
Right, councillors, we have 4 councillors at this point who have no conflicts of interest, so I'll throw the discussion open, please. Councillor Mather.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess the question begs, in a case like conflict, and that has been the bone of contention in local government for many years, is can you act impartially when that question is put to other members of your potential or perceived conflict of interest? Can you act impartially? I personally would like to think you could, but I fear that you have already demonstrated that you have a feeling for a position that's contrary to the recommendation. And I'd like to hear other members as well, please.
Councillor Eastwood.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe that the other councillors can be impartial. I believe that every council is, councillor is entitled to an opinion, and if we didn't have opinions, then we wouldn't be able to vote on anything. And so I'm very confident that the 2 councillors can participate in the voting process impartially and with a fair and even head. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eastwood. Councillor Friend.
Certainly, thank you. Through the Chair, I just have a question to both Councillor Bello and Councillor Lynch. You signed a petition. Did you encourage the petition and pass it on to others?
I signed the petition. I supported the petition. I made it clear 2 weeks ago here that I was prepared to move a motion on the spot, on the day. So I pretty well, from the start, have made it clear of my position up until this point in time. So I signed the petition.
So, Councillor Bello, you didn't pass it on to the petition on to anyone else and promote it?
No, just filled out the petition request and made my voice heard in that particular space, and nothing more, nothing less.
In that case, Mr. Mayor, I do see that there is a conflict. However, everyone is entitled to their opinion, and we all have very strong views, and that's why we ran for council in the first place. I do believe that I will state that they should stay in the room.
All right, thank you, Councillor Friend. Councillors, my view on this is that I do subscribe to Tim Fines-Clinton's comment in that perhaps wasn't a particularly judicious decision to support the petition just prior to a council meeting on the matter, but I understand that you may not have been aware at the time that a council meeting on this matter was going to be convened. So my advice would be that you may well be subject to some criticism from within the community if you are allowed to stay in the room, simply because there will be that perception, councillors, that you are not impartial, that you have formally stated a position and that you won't be impartial on this matter. So depending on the vote, that would be my comment to you, and my advice to you going forward is that when determining whether you're going to do these sorts of things in the future, that thought process may be wise. Right. All right, councillors, we will show by a vote of hands those who believe the councillors should stay in the room, those who believe they should not. Okay, so using my casting vote, Mr. CEO, I'll ask the 2 councillors to leave the room. Thank you. All right, councillors, looking to the Next item on the agenda, which is item 5, there are no public forums or deputations. Business arising from outstanding previous meetings, there are none. There are no petitions for item 7. Council or delegate reports, there are none. So there's nothing from the Audit, Risk and Business Improvement Committee, so we're on to 10.1, which is the Great Keppel Island Progress Association request for the letter of support. So before we go into debate on this, councillors, I'll seek a mover and a seconder for this one, and then we shall go into debate. So the recommendation is before you there, councillors. It has 3 parts. Does everyone understand what the recommendation is about? No questions at this point?
Mr.
Councillor
Mayor,
Mather?
I'm familiar with the 3 parts. I didn't particularly want to move it because I was hoping to make an amendment to the motion, but if I'm quite happy to...
We'll deal with this one first, councillor, that's all right, and
fine.
we'll take yours as a foreshadowed amendment.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so can I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation, please? No mover? No seconder?
Mr. Mayor, would it be appropriate, and I'll put this one through to the CEO, to move what I would call an amendment?
We'll entertain the amendment now,
But
councillor
it's
Mather.
not an amendment as such, but I could
It's
put
a
it forward
foreshadowed motion, is it?
as an alternative motion.
An alternate motion, all right.
Alternative motion.
Does Justine have a copy of that?
She will when I stand up, but I'd like to read it out first.
Go ahead,
Am
councillor.
I okay for that? Okay. It's the recommendation as it stands, with 2 additional clauses and a few small changes, additional words. And I'll read it, Mr. Mayor, with your permission. That the Mayor be authorised to write to the Minister for Tourism, Industry and Development and Innovation and advise that Council wants to see responsible development on Great Keppel Island which improves visitor experience for residents, private, and I've got in there businesses as well, and public guests, and therefore believes that some of the $30 million taxpayer investment committed to common user infrastructure should be directed to public projects, such as, and I've added in there, but not limited to, walking trails, visitor facilities, including shelters and seating, and public amenities. Number 2, Council is supportive of a well-planned and executed major development on Great Keppel Island and believes that the Queensland Government should expedite the decision on the future of the leases and associated conditions to allow development, including ongoing stakeholder engagement, to progress without delay. That remains intact, that paragraph. The third one, there are 2 word additions. In any event, Council, either as a local authority, trustee or corporate citizen, will not accept ownership or ongoing operations and maintenance responsibilities for any, and I've added the word major assets funded by the Queensland Government or a developer unless expressed, and I've got prior written acceptance is provided in the first instance. Those 2 word additions there. The 2 additional paragraphs, 4, that Council seek assurances from the State Government that the full $30 million...
Sorry, councillor, you might need to sort of wait for the typist on this one. Sorry. Council seeks assurances from the State
Council
Government.
seek assurances from the State Government that the full $30 million will remain available to provide additional tourist infrastructure on the island. And 5, the GKI Progress Association be advised of Council's response.
So, Mr. Mayor, I think it's quite messy.
So Justine, you'll be able to get that onto the screen in its entirety? So it reads that the Mayor be authorised to write to the Minister for Tourism, Industry Development and Innovation and advise that Council wants to see responsible development on Great Keppel Island which improves visitor experience for residents, private, business and public guests, and therefore believe that some of the $30 million taxpayer investment committed to common user infrastructure should be directed to public projects such as, but not limited to. Point 2, Council is supportive of a well-planned and executed major development on Great Keppel Island and believes that the Queensland Government should expedite the decision on the future of the leases and associated conditions to allow development, including ongoing stakeholder engagement, to progress without delay. And 3, in any event, Council, either as a local authority, trustee or corporate citizen, will not accept ownership or ongoing operations and maintenance responsibility for any major assets funded by the Queensland Government or a developer unless express prior written acceptance is provided in the first instance. 4, Council seek assurances from the State Government that the full $30 million will remain available to provide additional tourist infrastructure on the island. And 5, the GKI Progress Association be advised of Council's response. Councillor Mather, my point of clarification is around point 4 and point 1. The $30 million in point 1, you're saying some of that should be committed to walking trails, etc. Point 4, you're saying that the $30 million will remain available. I'm a little bit confused. You're saying what there?
In 1, we're saying the $30 million taxpayer investment committed to common user infrastructure should be directed to public projects such as, I mean, that's their examples, 3 examples. I'm saying, but not limited to those. Otherwise, people will pick it up and say, oh, they're the only 3 things that they want. There are other things that we can get. I'm just saying not limited to those, because that's what the wording says, such as, but not limited to.
Right, so in point 4 there, then you're saying that you want that $30 million commitment to remain on the table. Is that what you're saying?
I have fear, and it has been expressed to me on a couple of occasions, that if Council sends a list down and says we only want these things, the rest of the money will disappear, go back to the state. I'm asking that we ask the State Government to assure us that they will not withdraw any of the funding. They will keep that funding available in case we want something additional, that we decide that there's something else that we need. That's really what that means. Don't take the balance of the money away if we decide on certain infrastructure projects. The State Government remain committed to that money that they've offered to us. That's what I'm saying.
I understand.
The full 30 million.
Right, I understand. Councillors, any questions on the it's a foreshadowed resolution at this point in time?
They're all the same. The first 3 are basically all the same, Mr Mayor. The same as the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Mather. All right, so Justine, if we can return back to the original recommendation, please. We still have to deal with this one, councillors. So at this stage I have no mover and no seconder, which means it lapses for want of a mover and a seconder. Okay, so that one's dead in the water. So we'll go to your foreshadowed recommended motion, councillor, which now becomes the recommendation.
Becomes the motion.
So you're moving that, councillor
Yes,
Mather?
yes,
All
Mr.
right,
Mayor,
is
thank
anyone
you.
seconding that one? Okay, so that one lapses for want of a seconder. All right. So, councillors, we're in an impasse. We have no recommendation to discuss at this point in time. Do we have any alternate recommendations? Councillor Eastwood.
Yes, Mr Mayor. I ask that we go to the alternatives considered at the end of the report. It says the council accedes to the request from the GKI Progress Association Incorporated and write to the government in support of the infrastructure list assembled by it. And whilst
Sorry, Councillor Eastwood, where are you at? Sorry.
Oh, sorry. At the alternatives considered, right at the end of the report,
Page 11, thank you.
page 11,
Right.
number 1.
Okay, so council wants to see responsible development, is that where you are?
No,
No.
council accede to the request from the GKI Progress Association and write to the government in support of the infrastructure list assembled by it. You see, number 1 of alternatives considered, right at the bottom of page 11, Mr Mayor.
Right, bottom of page 11, right. Okay, right, I'm with you, thank you.
Yeah, and whilst I know some councillors would like to maybe add to that list in relation to some money being spent on walking trails, which would, and I don't know, we can't actually add to their list, but that is something that certainly, and I don't want to foreshadow debate here, Mr Mayor, but yeah, I'd like to put that one up anyway and see how we go.
Which one are you putting up? Number 1, councillor, is that
Number
right?
1, Mr Mayor.
All right. All right, so the recommendation before us, councillors, is that council accede to the request from GKI Progress Association Inc. and write to the government in support of the infrastructure list assembled by it. All right, so you're moving that, councillor Eastwood?
I'll move that, Mr Mayor.
All right, is there a seconder for this one? Okay, this one lapses for one of the seconder as well. Okay, so any alternate motions, councillors? I've put one into the ring. So, Justine, do you have that? This is very quickly drafted, so it might be a bit rough, councillors. So please accept my apologies for its format. Okay, so it reads, councillors, that the Mayor be authorised to write to the Minister for Tourism, Ministry of Development and Innovation and Minister for Sport, and in it advise that 1, Council offers support for the development of Great Keppel Island and the flow-on effects it will have for economic development, tourism and job creation. 2, Council wants to see responsible development on Great Keppel Island which improves visitor experience for residents, private and public guests, and therefore believes that some of the $30 million taxpayer investment committed to common user infrastructure should be directed to public projects such as walking trails, visitor facilities, public amenities. 3, Council respectfully requests the Queensland Government expedite the decision on the future of the leases and associated conditions. And 4, in any event, Council, either as a local authority, trustee or corporate citizen, will not accept ownership or ongoing operations and maintenance responsibility for any assets funded by the Queensland Government or a developer unless express written acceptance is provided in the first instance. So it's an amalgam of a couple of things there too, Councillor, but substantially not all that different.
I thought I saw earmarks were very similar to the motion that was lost. that didn't have a mover?
No, there's the wording in 1 is new. Wording in 2 is slightly different. 3, the wording is slightly different. And the wording is in 4 is pretty much the same. Any questions, councillors?
Certainly. Mr Mayor, when we state in 1, support for the development of Great Keppel Island, can that be more specific?
I'm open to suggestions, councillor.
Well, the GKI Progress Association has requested council send a letter of support. We were not here today to make a decision on whether their development should go ahead or not. That's purely the state and not local government. It was really just a letter of support. So, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Eastwood. You are correct, but we had received a letter from the Progress Association. This is where it's all begun from. So in stating that, what type of development are we specifically asking council to support on GKI, Mr Mayor?
Well, it's basically sufficiently, or it's worded such that we are saying here and that we will support development on Great Keppel Island, and that can be in any form. So it just is pretty much open-ended in that sense.
Mr Mayor, when it says the development, it appears that there's something specific that we're referring to. If the word were taken out,
Well,
it just shows development.
If you want to change that, councillors, I'm happy to put some words in. We can decide whether the recommendation goes into debate or not. One suggestion is for the redevelopment.
For the redevelopment, because it has been basically disassembled all this time.
I'm looking for some help here, councillors.
So am I, Mr Mayor.
Or just, Mr Mayor, just take out the for development of Great Keppel Island.
We're redeveloping it because it's been messed up.
Don't like it?
I like the redevelopment because it's been disassembled. It's been destroyed to a large
Redevelopment of Great Keppel Island?
redevelopment. I think that's
Councillor Eastwood, you're scribbling, you got some wordage? Right. Right, councillors, we're sitting here twiddling our thumbs in a sense,
Oh,
so...
no, Mr Mayor, we're just getting it right. We're
well,
trying to
we
do
probably
the
need to move on, though.
Mr Mayor, would you be happy to make reference? Would you be happy to make reference to a paragraph that would have the state government, what's the word, confirm its commitment to us to the $30 million total?
I'm happy for that to go in, councillor.
Well, I'd be very happy to support that motion then.
So
Because
that
it's
would read
important.
just in something like that.
It was like my
So we have the inclusion of point 5, councillors, which says council seeks, Justine, SWKS, assurances from the state government that the full 30 million will remain available to provide additional tourist infrastructure on the island. All right. Councillor Friend.
Certainly, Mr Mayor, just a suggestion. The state government originally, when they've pledged this money to Great Keppel Island, pledged it to the community and the people of Great Keppel Island. They included such things as a cyclone-rated jetty, a barge slant boat ramp, solar with backup generators, visitor facilities, including amenities, shade and seating, to rehabilitate existing walking trails, new walking trails, viewing platform and water treatment. So could that be added in?
I guess I'm looking at Councillor Mather's earlier wording. Perhaps we could just say public projects such as but not limited to.
Yes, that's.
Would you be happy with that, Councillor?
Yes, I would.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Does everyone understand the proposal? All right. So I'll seek a mover and a seconder on this one. Thank you.
It was your motion, Mr Mayor.
I know that, Councillor Mather. I just wondered if anyone else might want to move it. I'm happy to move
Happy to
it.
second it if you
Okay.
want us to take the lead.
So I'll move it. All right, so debate is now live. Councillors, I'll just make a statement before we go into debate on this. The matter today, councillors and members of the gallery, is about a number of things, particularly a level of support. It is not about a number of things as well. It is not about the transfer of leases from Tower to Alton. That is a state government issue. It is not ours. It is not about any list prepared by council versus the list of preferred community infrastructure projects put forward by the Great Keppel Island Progress Association. The list that was published under the guise of council was not a council list per se. And I want to make that very clear for the community and members of the gallery and those viewing it on live stream. That list came about because we were contacted by the state government late last year and again earlier this year seeking advice as to how we thought $30 million on the island might be spent. Now, our response to the state at the time was, well, it's your asset. Why are you asking us, in a sense? But they wanted an idea of what we thought that money could be spent on. So in order to sort of progress the discussion around that, we acceded to that request on the understanding that it was not a list endorsed by council via a council resolution. And I want to make that very clear. It was not a council endorsed list. It was a list we put together to help out the state government and provide some suggestion. Otherwise, we would have gone to community consultation on that list, but we didn't for that reason. And there's been a fair degree of misinformation spread around the community about that list. And again, I would just wish to clarify, it was not a council endorsed list. Thirdly, we're not approving how the $30 million should be spent and on what infrastructure projects. Again, we're just making suggestions. And we're not making any comment about whether any particular infrastructure contracts should be awarded to Alton, Tower, or anybody else for that matter. Unfortunately, but perhaps not unexpectedly, this issue has tended to polarise the community. And it's been evident from many of the comments we've received over the past week that that's happened. I've been told over the past week by at least 4 people that this council should start to show some leadership. Well, my experience with those comments is that those people tend to want us to vote according to the way they think. Council's role here is to determine whether we write a letter of support to the Minister and what that letter will contain, nothing else. So all the other issues about transfers of leases, contracts, all that sort of stuff is peripheral to this discussion today. This discussion is about a letter of support and nothing else. So councillors, I'll ask for any other comments in relation to this particular resolution now, but I wanted to make those particular issues clear to our members of the community, because there's been a lot of misinformation about this particular issue in the community, and I just wanted to clarify that, because we need to be clear on what it is we are voting on today. Councillor Friend, your light's on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was an accident, but I'll continue. So I am in favour of this particular resolution, but I also have some comments that I'd like to make. On the 16th of February, Council resolved to consult with the community in relation to a request for a support letter requesting $30 million pledged by the state be passed to a developer, and here we are. We have spoken to and received many submissions with in-depth comments from GKI residents, our local community, upstanding environmental organisations, and importantly, the spokesperson for the Whopper Borough Elders. I've heard both those in support of the $30 million being passed to the proposed developer and those emphatically not in support. Both have different reasons, however, both agreed that something must be done and that the island requires infrastructure. I've heard that Council has done nothing on the island for 2 decades. Keeping in mind the council-owned land on the island is minimal and the majority is owned by state, leased, Whopper Borough, business and residents. It is with prudence that I take into consideration both the fors and againsts. I'm mindful that the proposed developer has not yet been granted the leases for the island. The state government, according to history, is not in a habit of giving developers money, and that most development is performed with funds that are private. This is not a local government decision to support and apportion state funds. The decision today is to look at this resolution and decide whether we pass or we don't pass it. Now to public consultation. There has been a petition on social media by the supporting parties of the proposed developer. And I say proposed, again, they have not as yet obtained the leases from the state. How can the council be asked to send a letter of support to the state for a proposed developer who does not have the lease? The petition clearly states that their list includes transport infrastructure incorporating a breakwall, barge ramp and ferry terminal. But there was absolutely no mention of a proposed marina. The community needs to be aware that a future resort is dependent on the development and sale of a residential development proposed for the island. There is no mention in this petition of the next stage development for residential townhouses sold for commercial profit before the resort has commenced. This was stated in the public meeting dated the 8th of February. As stated in their petition, building of an eco-friendly resort absolutely sounds ideal for the island, and I agree. However, this is a future stage. Within the petition by the supporting party for the developer, there was no funds stated for visitor facilities and walking trails. Within their petition, it stated, and I quote, "If council chooses to support walking trails instead of public infrastructure for GKI, the rebuilding of the GKI resort will not go ahead with Altum or any other developer." Wow, this is an incredible statement. We as a council were only asked to send a letter of support to the state in the role of advocate only. Let me make that clear. If the letter, Now to the council's public consultation. When this letter arrived at the council table on the 16th of February, it was decided that we would seek consultation with the public. 7 community leaders should not be the deciding factor for what the community want in infrastructure at Great Keppel Island. We received from local community members a majority of support to keep the $30 million of taxpayer-funded money for GKI infrastructure for which the council proposed. I would like to see a jetty, definitely for all ability access, which I believe the state has mentioned when they pledged the funds for GKI. For more than a decade now, GKI has been supported by everyday travellers, those day trippers that wish for these public amenities that I've just stated earlier. They travel to the island to relax and enjoy the captivating natural surrounds that this jewel provides. The Capricorn Conservation Council noted that it is supportive of the intent of these projects outlined in Livingstone Shire Council's GKI priority community infrastructure, that they are definitely supportive of further tourism and infrastructure on the island, and they recommend that the state government funds are directed to public tourism and recreation infrastructure, which improves the experience for all visitors to the island, whether day visitors or visitors using other island facilities. Supports compatible new and existing ecotourism ventures and businesses. It assists in protecting and managing the natural resources and the values of the island, are of benefit to the local community and not solely for private gain, and is considered to fill the definition of common use or public infrastructure. Finally, to quote Auntie Glenys Croft, who is the coordinator of the Wapabara Tribal Elders. Wapabara Tribal Elders do not support a marina at Putney Beach, as it would be a cultural disaster. As the tower leases have not yet been decided, it is important to go back to the Minister for Keppel, Brittany Lauger, her original suggestions for the money allocated on GKI. And I'll just repeat what I said a little earlier. Wapabara will support a cyclone-rated jetty, barge slant boat ramp, solar with backup generators, facilities, visitor facilities including amenities, shade and seating, rehabilitate existing walking trails and add new walking trails, a viewing platform and water treatment plant. So there are a number of other reasons why I agree with this particular resolution today, but for the brevity's sake, I'll just sum up by stating that whatever happens to the proposed developer and what their requirements may be, it is a decision that is made by the Queensland State Government and not here in Livingstone Shire Council. We are not the ones who will make or break any development on Livingstone Shire, in Livingstone Shire and on GKI. This was only ever about advocacy and a letter of support. So I'm in favour for this new resolution. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Friend. Any other comments from the councillors? Councillor Eastwood?
Yes, Mr Mayor, look, I'd like to speak against the resolution. Now, I believe all this. Right, I believe that it's good, but it's a little bit wishy-washy. You know, we were asked originally to support a letter from the GKI Progress Association, and whilst I don't advocate for everything that's on that list, I am pro the GKI Association and what their endeavours are. I really believe that we need to get something happening on Keppel Island. We need development there, and I want to be part of a council that advocates for that, and I do believe that we can make or break by our stance. And I just want to show some leadership today and say that I am for, and I'm not necessarily for Alton, but I'm for progress. I'm for that island to go ahead. And I can't say strongly enough, as a member, I'm a little bit disappointed how things have panned out today, but that's life in politics. I'm disappointed in the resolution that first got put up. I thought we were coming here for something else, even though I was fully warned by the notes and the resolution being put, the agenda being sent out to us. But that was what we should have been doing, a yay or nay on this, and that should have been the end of it. But I can't speak highly against it. I'm for the island going ahead, and I don't want to be part of being a stopping point to that. I love Great Keppel Island like anybody else. I don't want to see it sabotaged or hurt, but we need development, and we need that island to be brought back to its best. And the more that we sit around on our hands And play around with this stuff, the longer it's going to take. And what else can I say? I'm one man standing alone here.
Thank you, Councillor Eastwood. Councillor Mather, do you want to speaking for the motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I hope you'll indulge, because I am going to go back historically a little bit to put it all in perspective. And as for one man standing alone, it didn't have to be like that. Everybody has choices, and those choices have us in this position today. I'm just going back over the early history here, so that, and it's not too long, to bring you up to speed as to how we arrived at this position. In 2008, the major resort infrastructure was closed by Tower Holding without warning to council. He had a comprehensive development planned, additional leases, looking for partners. In 2017, big jump ahead, the state government committed $25 million to the GKI recovery package, which included key power and water connections to the mainland, sewage treatment plant, public jetty, boat ramp, amenities for visitors including public toilets. 2019, the state found the cost for water and power exceeded the funding that was provided. I think we all knew nobody was going to get that for $25 million. In 2019, Eltham exchanged contracts with Tower to acquire the island freehold and started the new approval process with the state government. Up to October of 20, the state increased the commitment to $30 million to fund common user infrastructure. The state announced that the infrastructure plan for GKI now included a cyclone-rated jetty, barge, boat ramp, solar, backup generators, visitor facilities including amenities, shade and seating, the rehabilitation of existing walk trails, new trails, a viewing platform and water treatment. That's what the state government announced. Its own announcement, not ours. In late 2020, Eltham met with council, put up a list of identified priority infrastructure to aid the required community infrastructure component of the planned Eltham development on the island. December of 20, the Progress Association was formed to have a voice to prioritise the funding and selection of community infrastructure on the island. In December of 20, government officers requested council list of priority community infrastructure for Great Keppel Island to be completed by mid-January. In February 21, a public forum at Roslyn Bay to discuss Eltham development proposal. Eltham had not received a decision from the state at that date, nor the leases to progress any development. Eltham was waiting, we were waiting. It would reach a stalemate. February 21, Eltham wrote to council requesting that it write to the minister to endorse a list of strategic projects enabling public infrastructure as identified by the association, which I took had already been identified by the state government. 16th of February, the letter was tabled at a council meeting. At this date, the minister has neither provided the developer with a decision, he has not identified what, if any, infrastructure would be funded by the state, or provided access to the leases, enabling the developer to progress his plans. I feel for the developer who has been so patient awaiting a government decision. I feel for the people and businesses of our Shire who have waited 13 years for someone to take up the rights to develop the island in a way which reflects the image of sustainable development. The destruction of existing infrastructure all those years ago, which adequately serviced the day trippers, combined with the government's failure to enforce the conditions of Tower's leases, has placed an unfair burden on all stakeholders in this matter, particularly our council. The shifting of the goalposts, The commitment of the $30 million of public money to an unspecified project without any clear direction as to who pays for what has caused division within our communities. It is clear that the responsibility of determining the island's future has been unfairly devolved to the council, a responsibility which should sit squarely at the feet of the state government. Council will play its part, but it will not be coerced or forced to undertake the expenditure of public monies in the manner which has been suggested. Each stakeholder must play its part, but the boundaries and conditions associated with the major expenditure must be fair and transparent. This has not been demonstrated to date. And in closing, Mr. Mayor, it is important that the state government be sent a clear message that it is not the council's responsibility but the state, and the state still has that determination to make in relation to the leases. And that's why we need to be given a guarantee by the state that that $30 million is available to do what is required to bring that island back into some state of resemblance. Because between any developer, whoever that developer may be, and the council, we will play our parts. But don't push this responsibility, these decisions onto a council which has not been a fair player in all of this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mather. In closing, councillors and members of the community, I just want to make it clear that I don't think there's anyone around this table, including the councillors here or who are absent, who does not support development on Great Keppel Island. I think we all support development on Great Keppel Island. Do I think the state should hurry up and make a decision? Absolutely. Do I think a barge facility or a jetty or something of those along those lines is necessary on the island for offloading and onloading passengers? Yes. Do I want to see Great Keppel Island progress? Yes. But this particular resolution, I think, expresses the view of council around the table. Might not necessarily be Councillor Eastwood's, but in general, I think it sends a message to the state that we are supportive of development on Great Keppel Island, but we are also wanting them to stump up and say, let's get on with this, please. And that's the clear message I think this particular resolution sends. All right, councillors, I think we're at the pointy end now, so we'll close debate and go to the vote. So all in favour of the recommendation? Those against? Did you want your vote recorded, councillor?
No, that's all right, Mr. Mayor.
All right. 3-1. All right.
Mr. Mayor, I think it's fair, and for the sake of the gallery being present today, that I certainly, and I suspect other members present here today, have no joy in voting that the other two members were required to leave the table. There's nothing we like better than having some good heated debate here that stimulates everybody's thinking and we're satisfied then we come up with something that everybody's mostly agreeable with. But the public must realise that the laws that govern us today and require us to be transparent and accountable in every little thing we do, boy, have I been the subject of all of those for many years. We have an obligation not only to the other members but to ourselves, because we can be challenged if we make the wrong decision that is not transparent in their cause.
Is that Mr. Mayor?
Councillor Eastwood?
My problem with that is that I don't see the difference between signing a petition and actually having those thoughts, you know, and even telling people we've got those thoughts. We all stand for something, or we stand for nothing. And if we can't be allowed just to sign a petition and then still be able to vote at the table, well, I don't know. But we voted for it though, so what else can, you know?
All right, well, can I just impart, Councillor, the advice we received from King and Company yesterday? And Councillor Bello was present when I made the phone call.
Yep.
The advice was from Tim Pines Clinton is that in situations like this, where a petition has been signed, it can be viewed by members of the community that that particular councillor has committed to a position before the matter comes before council, and therefore impartiality is potentially compromised. That was his solid advice, and his advice to Councillor Bello at the time was that if it was him, he would step out. Now, I use the casting vote, my casting vote, Councillor, and I'm not making a magnanimous gesture here, but in a sense to protect both of those councillors from that likely criticism, because I don't want to see any of these councillors unduly judged or unfairly judged on matters such as that. So that was my rationale, Councillor, in terms of why I used my casting vote the way I did. So, councillors, that brings the matter to a close. Councillor
Mayor.
Friend, yes.
Before we do come to a close, for those watching either in the gallery or online, would you kindly, in layman's terms, let everybody know what our resolution is, because they think people may be confused by it.
Good point, Councillor Friend, thank you. So the resolution is as follows, that the Mayor be authorised to write to the Minister for Tourism, Industry Development and Innovation and Minister for Sport, the Honourable Sterling Hinchcliffe, although that's not named there, and advise that one, council offers support for redevelopment of Great Keppel Island and the flow-on effects it will have for economic development, tourism and job creation. And two, council wants to see responsible redevelopment of Great Keppel Island which improves visitor experience for residents, private and public guests, and therefore believes that some of the $30 million taxpayer investment committed to common user infrastructure should be directed to public projects such as, but not limited to, walking trails, visitor facilities including shelters and seating, and public amenities. 3, council respectfully requests the Queensland Government expedite the decision on the future of the leases and associated conditions. 4, in any event, council, either as a local authority, trustee or corporate citizen, will not accept ownership or ongoing operations and maintenance responsibility for any asset funded by the Queensland Government or a developer unless express written acceptance is provided in the first instance. And 5, council seeks assurances from the state government that the full $30 million will remain available to provide additional tourist infrastructure on the island. All right, councillors, that being the only matter for discussion today, I shall close the meeting. Thank you for your attendance. Thank you to the members of the gallery, and thank you to members of the community viewing in on live stream. Have a great afternoon.